Fantastic. Okay, so I think we've got a good crowd now. Welcome everybody. My name is Dan Hare. I'm from eShot. I'm joined today by my very good friend Alex Hilditch from MarketScan. This is our B2B email Q&A. This is the second one of these we've done, and I believe we've got lots of great questions from you all today, which we're going to attempt to answer. The format for today is I'm going to try and answer lots of stuff. Alex is going to try and answer lots of stuff as well. We're going to run through the questions as you asked them before the webinar on the invites themselves, and then later in the session, if you want to ask more questions or indeed expand on some of the things we cover today, there'll be the opportunity to ask more questions. And indeed, if you would like to, you can chat to us with a bit of audience participation as well. My colleague Sadie is behind the scenes, and she's going to have a look at the questions. If you use the chat facility to ask additional questions or ask for clarification on some of the things we ask as we go, but my hope and expectation is everybody will leave the session today with some really great actionable insights that they can hopefully use to improve their email marketing and their marketing in the more general sense. Alex, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Welcome everyone. I'm really pleased to be here again.
Great. So Al, what have we got this week then? What are the burning questions that we've had asked?
We've had a number of questions relating to GDPR. So what I think would be a good idea if we start to go through those as a group of questions. And I think Dan's come pre-prepared in Blue Peter style with some slides to accompany that as well. So if we go with question number one, what are the best practices around email marketing? Also, how can we make sure that we don't break any GDPR rules? And that is followed very closely with, how do I build a relevant email list, and do people have to opt in, or can I just send to anyone?
Great. Yeah, really great questions. I mean, as far as best practice in email marketing is concerned, obviously there's a lot of best practice and there's a lot of varying opinion on what best practice represents. For me, best practice tends to revolve around one central theme. Are you sending the right person the right message at the right time? And there's a huge amount of challenges in answering that, and obviously making sure that what you're doing is sending people emails that are relevant. Relevancy is probably the one word that stands out for me above everything else as far as email marketing is concerned. If you are sending people things which are of no interest to them, then your email marketing will not work. If you're sending things that are of interest to them, and obviously the timing of that is critical, then you will see a good result. So we'll cover some of those themes as we go through the session today, as we look more at the ins and outs of what best practice looks like, you know, when we talk about things like cadence, time of sending, subject lines, etc., etc. On the GDPR point, it's a really difficult area to cover in a session like this, and more to the point, I'm not a lawyer and neither is Alex, so we have to be very careful in terms of what advice we give when it comes to complying with relevant legislation in relation to email marketing. What I would say is there is a truckload of resource available to you, and the most authoritative source of that is the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, which in the UK specifically is the body which is charged for both the guidance and indeed enforcement of things like the GDPR. Now, what you find in business-to-business marketing specifically is there's a lot of confusion over what you are and indeed not allowed to do in email marketing. And that's because effectively we have two slightly conflicting pieces of legislation. We have the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations, 2003, get that in one breath, affectionately known as the PECR. And then we also have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation of 2018. And the two don't necessarily fully align. What we saw in January this year was the ICO published a draft code of practice, which the way that they've done that, it would theoretically be legally binding once it's published fully. It's only draft at the moment, and there was some very interesting stuff in there around what to do in terms of acquiring email addresses through means other than getting people to opt in, having their consent to communicate with them. It's well worth a read. Watch out for the emails that go out to you after the session, where we will share lots of useful links that we cover related to things we cover today. And certainly that draft guidance from the ICO is an interesting document, because it does set out more clearly some of the things that the ICO expect in relation to how you use data in relation to the GDPR. But the principal theme there is, if consent, if someone has said, yes, I want to receive emails from you, that is the gold standard. That is what you should always be striving for. And even if you don't have it, that's what you should be striving for, even with the contacts where you are using another lawful basis to process. So if you are using legitimate interest as a lawful basis to process email addresses at the moment, one of the things that you should consider doing with that is try to convert those where you are citing legitimate interest into actually having consent. And that would be by doing things like getting them to download white papers, register for your newsletter, and indeed attend things like webinars, whereby you can actually put them through a process which gives you a record of consent to communicate with them from that point onwards.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Dan. Another one which I think is going to be quite an interesting one from the GDPR perspective is, how do we know we are targeting the correct audience using B2B email data? Obviously, there's a crossover from GDPR as well as overall personas, but again, I think Dan can talk quite authoritatively on this one.
Yeah, I mean, accurate data is a constant challenge. And when I look at customers who have problems with their email marketing, one of the very common themes I find is they don't have good data cleanliness practices in place. In other words, more often than not, they have a database. They can't really tell you how they got that database. It's been put together through lots of different sources over time, and there's very little going on with it from a housekeeping perspective. And the analogy I often use is, your email marketing database is a little bit like a plant. You have to feed it, you have to water it, but you also have to prune it. And certainly what we've seen just in the last couple of months, we have seen an increase in generally speaking, in open and click-through rates with email campaigns. But we've also seen an increase in bounces and unsubscribes in business-to-business data specifically. And I think you may find that is down to the fact that there are, unfortunately, people losing their jobs. There are people furloughed, and there is a lot of turmoil going on in terms of who is working within the organizations that you might be targeting at the moment. So really having good data practices in place to ensure that you have accurate and up-to-date information are key. And again, we'll look at some of that a little bit later on. I know we've got some questions on LinkedIn. That can be a useful source to ensure data is up to date. But probably one of the best sources, and it's in no small part why we work with MarketScan, is obviously there are professionals who can help you to cleanse your existing data and indeed to ensure that you are targeting the right people.
Fantastic. If just to make sure people are clear, we are the professionals at MarketScan that can help you with that. So if you do have any requirements for cleansing, or just talking about your overall data to help, exactly what Dan said, prune as well as make sure you're keeping it watered, there's lots of things that can be done to enhance those data sets. Again, the next question is rolling into that to a fairly strong degree as well, where we've got how to build a database, link it to other marketing activities, and what CRM system should I use? And then there's a side of all on a limited budget.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the tools that you use, obviously I'm biased. eShot is a marketing automation platform. It does email marketing, and indeed there is a CRM capability within it. So obviously I'm a little bit biased on that one, but there are lots and lots of tools that you can use relatively inexpensively to help you manage this stuff. In terms of that, how you build that database and manage it, the thing is, I'm a big fan of email marketing, but it's not the be all and end all. And actually what I see time and again, the most successful campaigns are multi-channel. They are using social, they are using email, they are using good old-fashioned techniques like the phone to engage with contacts through multiple touch points. When I look at, we also have a lot of business to consumer customers. We're doing some work for a very large government organization at the moment. They've got a huge campaign running on the television, and every time there's a TV ad shown, their website lights up like a Christmas tree, and indeed we get lots of subscriptions to their newsletter around that time. So when you are planning your campaigns and you're building a database, you have to think about what are the best, most effective ways to feed people into your pipeline, to generate opportunities in the first place. But then also, how are you going to nurture those opportunities? An email tends to be the most effective business-to-business methodology for actually nurturing people. If only everybody that we tried to sell to wanted to buy everything on the first day we spoke to them. Very rarely the case. Business to business buyer journeys are very complex, especially when you're talking to enterprises. They can last months, even years, involve multiple stakeholders. So you have to continue to engage those people, and that's where email can really come into its own, so that when a salesperson may have forgotten to follow up with an opportunity from a few months ago, the emails are still keeping in touch. And more importantly, the interactions with those emails are being tracked, so you can then spot buying behavior again.
Fantastic. The next one is, how do you identify who you should email? I mean, I can start on this one to help Dan out and give him a bit of a break. But I mean, identifying who you should email, it's really about looking at your own customer base already. Profile who you are getting good success from. You can also, from that, also find out who you're not getting the most success from. And then you can use that data to decide who you should be then targeting for either getting some audiences through Facebook with some lookalike audiences to make sure you're doing the right things, whether it is buying some fresh lease data, or any other activity that you can to drive subscriptions to have the most effective email database that you can possibly have. So you're going to get the return on investment. And it's the return on investment is obviously the key part of why. It's the why. It's why you do marketing. You need to get return on investment. You need to drive the business forward. So if you know who you're going after, then you can just replicate that, rinse and repeat the same process over and over again until you stop to see the success in the same way. And then you can realign, do something else, and then attack it in that way as well. Anything to add to that, Dan?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think if I just share my screen for a sec, I think one thing that we'll again send out in the follow-ups on this, I often use this matrix. Is that coming through, Al?
Yeah, I can see it perfectly.
Yeah, so this is my targeting matrix, which I tend to use when I'm helping customers to work out who it is that they're actually going after. It's divided into categories there. Behavioral, what trends can you identify? And indeed, at the moment, my suggestion would be actually look at this fresh, because you might find who is buying stuff from you at the moment, and the actions that people are taking are different from what they would have been just a few months ago. I was helping another customer the other day, and we were chatting about their current marketing and their pipeline, and they said basically any opportunities that they had from before March, they've thrown away. They've had to start again from scratch, and they find it's a very different type of customer with a very different set of requirements who are talking to them right now. The good news is for them, it seems to be bigger firms than they traditionally would be dealing with, those that are perhaps looking to cut costs from using other kind of enterprise level suppliers. And the other thing is there's an urgency, so those who are buying at the moment, they're buying because there are problems within their business which they need to address. And I think this is one of the key things. I talked about this in one of my other webinars a couple of months ago. In times of recession, you have to focus on what people need as opposed to what they would like. Discretionary purchasing, both in a consumer and in a business-to-business capacity at the moment, is going to be challenging via the very nature of the economic backdrop as much as anything else. So you need to work out, who it is that is most likely to buy, to want what you have at the moment. And when I say want, I mean they need it. Then look at profiling those. Look at, is it specific industries? Is it specific sizes of company that need your products and services at the moment? And indeed, the other firmographic values that I often refer to is the role and the seniority within the business. You may have found previously it was somebody in the marketing department, whereas now you're dealing with a finance team, because actually what they're doing is they're going through their existing suppliers and they are looking for quotes from others to try and save money. So well worth trying to get your finger on the pulse of what's happening right now, as in today. Talk to your sales team, talk to your account management teams, get insights from them as to who they think you should be targeting and has it changed at all, and then try and map out the exact nature of the sort of business that you should be going after. Then when you've got that worked out, then obviously you look to target individuals and indeed companies that fit with that profile.
Fantastic. Right, so the last one on this section of questioning is, how do I get my subscriber list to be a high quality?
Yeah, well, it comes back to that principle of feeding it and watering it, and indeed pruning it. Firstly, how are you getting new subscribers in? How are people that visit your website today being encouraged to actually continue to receive communication from you? There's lots and lots of innovations that can help with that: pop-ups, live chat facilities, etc., etc. Ways to nudge traditionally passive website visitors into actually keeping in touch with you. The other thing is, obviously, in terms of maintaining that quality, then is you have to look at who's not engaging, and we'll cover this a little bit later on, because I know we have a couple of more technical questions on how to actually use eShot itself, but that's where we have things like the engagement categories in eShot, so we can highlight to you when there are groups within your existing database who aren't engaging via email, and you have to do something different with them, or indeed get rid of them, find new contacts.
Excellent. Right, well, the next question is one that we've talked about at MarketScan quite a lot, and we've seen certain trends for this, but I think down with you being a platform for sending emails, you'll be better placed to really answer this one. So over the past few months, what have you observed in terms of change in engagement, open rates, and best times to deliver content?
Yeah, I mean, as I think I mentioned just now, generally speaking, we've seen open rates and indeed click-through rates improve pretty universally across the board, and that applies to both our B2B senders and our B2C senders. The exact nature of why, my sense is people have had a lot more time at their computers, less meetings, and well, if they are meetings, they're Zoom meetings. So you probably find people are spending more time at their desks, so to speak, at home, and therefore potentially reading more email as a consequence. And certainly when my phone gives me my sort of weekly screen time summary of recent, I cringe a little bit by just how many hours I seem to be spending sat in front of the screen. So yes, generally speaking, we've seen an improvement in open and click-through rates across the board. Whether that is maintained remains to be seen. Obviously, lockdown has been eased in a number of ways. However, certainly professionally, I think a lot of people that are being targeted with business-to-business communications continue to work from home and will continue to work from home for some time to come. In terms of the when, it's a question which I always approach cautiously, because if you Google it, you'll find all manner of advice that says, Thursday is the best time to send an email, or Tuesday is the best time to send an email, and you should send emails at 10 a.m. or you should send emails at 3 p.m. and things like that. And I don't tend to buy into it. And the reason for that is there's a disconnect between when an email is sent and when an email is actually opened and read. They're not necessarily the same things. It's not necessary for your email to go ping in someone's inbox at the time when you think they're going to read them. Now, generally speaking, most email does get read within an hour of it being delivered, but what we see pretty universally, again, on business-to-business campaigns and indeed business-to-consumer campaigns, is you get that initial spike of activity around an email campaign when it's sent, and then you'll get a spike in the evening, and then you'll get a spike the following morning. In other words, those that perhaps weren't looking at their email during the day, they catch up on it towards the end of the day, or indeed they catch up on it in the morning. And I think, generally speaking, although, back to that point that we are all spending a lot more time at home, there are still an awful lot of professionals who, they're not just sitting there waiting to read emails. So I don't think it necessarily matters, what time it's sent as to what time the recipient actually reads it. And, there is a lot of research on this, and there are a lot of trends, but again, I'd question about how valuable those trends are at the moment. The one thing I would encourage you to do is test your own audience, because it will be unique to your own circumstances and the type of people that you are targeting. So there's various tools that you can use to achieve that. Within eShot, we have something called rate control. So you can tell eShot to send your audience, split it up into batches. So it sends a few thousand emails each hour. And then you can look for spikes in the results of that to see, well, was there a particular time of the day where we saw a better response? The other way you can do it is actually split test it. So you can create what's called a multivariate test. So you can say, I want to send 30% of my emails at 10 a.m. on Monday, and 30% at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, and 30% at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. And again, you can review those results and see what whether you can see any patterns there. The one thing I would say is don't base any kind of don't look at the results of a single campaign. It is the sort of thing I would probably want to test over a number of weeks and a number of campaigns to try and get some trends there. And I think from memory, we had somebody asking about senior contacts. Certainly before lockdown, what I'd seen with a couple of customers that I was working with quite closely, they were targeting C-level executive contacts. Sunday afternoons were actually a great time for email engagement, perversely, as those who maintain positions, high up positions in business, probably preparing for the week ahead. Whether that's the case now, I'd need to go back and look at the data again.
Excellent.
And as I said, if there are further questions on this, if you want to dig into this in more detail, we can take further questions at the end. And my colleague Sadie is behind the scenes curating the questions, hopefully.
All right, thanks for that as well, Dan. I mean, just in regards to what Dan has mentioned with split testing, again, about this time last year, we sort of revamped our own email marketing strategy, and we did a lot of split testing, looking at different times. And I think I'll sort of echo what Dan has said, that actually over the course of time, even with the last 3 months, times of days haven't really changed for us. However, yes, the open rates have certainly improved. So now is a good time to get in front of the right people again, but go back to what we've already discussed in regards to make sure you're messaging right, the person's right, that the time of day won't necessarily have as much of an impact as long as you are fulfilling those fixing those challenges that those contacts have had or got. Right, so the next question for you, Dan, which I know is one of your favorites: best practices on email cadence to turn prospects into users, quantity and scheduling of emails, and any copy tips.
Yep. So if we deal with cadence first, again, it's one of those, I'm not copying out when I say it depends. If you are going at cold data, in other words, people that you have no idea whether they have any interest in your products or service or not, then my recommendation would be to go slow and steady. Maximum 1 email a week, probably depending on the circumstance, depending on the industry and who you're targeting, maybe even once a month. But in terms of improving that cadence, it really comes down to that behavioral targeting. So if you see activity which indicates buying behavior, if you see things which indicate interest, then you can actually get away with emailing people quite a lot over a short period of time. So as I say, it depends on the nature of who you're communicating with as to how much you should send them and how quickly. The one thing I would say is don't worry too much about overloading people with email, okay? A test I often do in my workshops: tell me about an unsolicited email that you received yesterday. Can anybody remember any of them? Probably not, because frankly, you've forgotten about it. So if you did email someone a couple of times in the space of a couple of days, chances are if they didn't see it the first time, they might not see it even the second time, or indeed they might. And obviously one of the tactics which you can use sparingly is to resend the same email to people who didn't open it the first time. The only thing you have to be careful with that is there is a fundamental error in open rates. Different devices handle opens in different ways, and the other thing with that is obviously keep a close eye on your unsubscribe rates. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, like I said, if you've got engagement, if you've got people that are interested, or more to the point, the reason that you are emailing someone is because they have actually inquired, then you can go at them much harder and faster. And there's an old principle called the Fibonacci scale, whereby the circles get greater. So if they inquire on your website today, email them immediately, and then email them again tomorrow. And if they engage with that email tomorrow, then email them again the next day. But if they don't, then wait a couple of days. And when there's engagement, keep going fast. And when there's not engagement, slow things down. Okay? One thing that is not necessary is if you did get somebody who inquired on your website today and they asked for a quote, or they asked for pricing details, I mean, a tangible inquiry, not they downloaded a white paper or something like that, but an actual sales inquiry, don't wait. Don't email them a week from now, and certainly don't then put them into some drip campaign that only emails them once a fortnight or once a month. There should be nurture series that go at those people quite quickly. If they don't engage, then you slow them down and put them into a kind of newsletter cycle of maybe once a month. Okay?
Perfect. I was just going to say that you asked a question about, do you remember our unsolicited email from yesterday? And I've got an example of one that I have. So it was from my goodness, shock. It was from a well-known UK job board, where they sent me an email which had 2 question marks as the subject line. And then it was, dear, no personalization whatsoever. So they'd obviously started to create their campaign and got a bit trigger happy, sent it out. And then I think it was 5 minutes later, I received the same email, but without any personalization, because I obviously realized they don't have it, with a proper from address that wasn't on the original, and an actual subject line that wasn't question marked. So yes, I remember it, but I remember it for the wrong reasons. So again, when you're doing your email marketing,
it got your attention, though.
It got my attention, but I won't be contacting them to do any of my recruitment for Market Scan, unfortunately, on this occasion. So it's just a warning. Obviously, be careful when you do click send, that you have thoroughly done your testing and you have thoroughly thought about your subject line, because that is the key thing that's going to get you opens and ultimately engagement.
Yeah, I have to say, it's one of the things which I see an awful lot of errors in email marketing. I see a lot of silly mistakes. Indeed, the example Alex gave me is from a big reputable firm. I got an email from LinkedIn yesterday. The subject, the headline in the email was main headline. The care and attention that people spend on their email marketing surprises me sometimes. And as far as I'm concerned, and the team who work with me, they know nothing goes out without an eyeball. Somebody has to check it, and I don't mean the people that were creating the email campaign. Somebody who's away from it. So a good tip, as far as quality control with emails is concerned, when you're happy that the campaign is ready to go, when you've tested everything 15 times, send it to someone who's not involved in the actual campaign creation process and get them to review it thoroughly and properly. The other thing you can do, obviously, if you're an eShot user, you use our forensics tool, and that is going to look through all the links, that's going to look through all the copy, and it's going to highlight any issues for you automatically. But yeah, do spend time to ensure that your email marketing is done properly and done well. And it never ceases to amaze me how silly mistakes creep into emails from very big firms.
Excellent. Right, so the next question is, I would like to know what is best practice when it comes to B2B email marketing. Frequency of sends, length of subject line, best practice of layout, and image copy to image ratio. So I think some of this we've covered already, but I think there's definitely some gaps you can fill in there, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think with things like subject lines, we'll make sure it's in the follow-up information that goes out to you. But the previous one of these sessions we actually went through subject lines in quite a lot of detail and looked at some best practice on that. So there's a section of that of the recording from last time, which is well worth looking at. Generally speaking, with subject lines, you have to grab people's attention, and there's lots of different tactics for achieving that. But it's really a case of, in a crowded inbox, and let's face it, no one is sitting there saying, "Oh, I'm not getting many emails." You have to find ways to achieve standout. The 2 ways that I tend to recommend you achieve that is either by putting something remarkable in someone's inbox, or indeed putting something relevant. So does your subject line stand up to the test of, is this talking to the person I'm sending it to? Is there something relevant and interesting for them in that very short space of the subject line? And from a technical perspective, it is just a few words. You can back it up with the preview text, but it really is a short space that you've got to deal with. The other tactic, like I say, is remarkable subject lines. Is there something that you can put in a subject line which makes people sit up and pay attention? So, for instance, last week I got a business email where the subject line was cancellation. And I was, ooh, what's this about? And it was a blog post. It was promoting a blog post talking about retention tactics, etc., etc. But just that one word subject line, cancellation, absolutely got my attention. So, a lot of time in my experience, people put a lot more creativity into the content of the email than they do in the subject line. And actually the subject line is the thing that will have the biggest effect on the performance of a campaign. So be as creative within that space as you possibly can be. Now, when we're talking about business-to-business email specifically, someone asked, you asked there about the image-to-text ratio. Please always bear in mind that most business-to-business email clients, and when I say most, effectively I mean Outlook, blocks images by default. So you should always, when you're doing business-to-business email marketing, look at how your email appears with the images switched off. In other words, does it still make sense? Does it look good? Or do you have huge spaces where the recipient can't really understand what's going on with the email unless they download the images? So we often see people make mistakes by putting headlines, putting the copy actually into images rather than just having them actually as text in the email itself. In terms of the ratio, it does represent older methods of spam filtration, but if your email is more than 60% images, then that will raise a red flag with some spam filters because it will think that you're trying to hide things in images. So generally speaking, with business to business email marketing, and it is different for B2C, but generally speaking with business to business, images should support the message. They shouldn't be the message, and you should use them sparingly.
So it's a nice, easy one for everyone. You just need to be remarkable and relevant. Next question is, how do you overcome writer's block to get what seems a daunting process started?
Well, for me personally, I just delegate.
I was about to say that's not the right answer.
No, it's not the right answer. No, I mean, if you don't know what to write about, my best advice on that would be quite simply find out what everyone else is talking about. Okay, now that will obviously depend on the context of your own business. Again, speak to your account manager, speak to your salespeople. What are the questions that you're getting from existing clients and prospects? What are their challenges? Again, think back to what I was saying earlier on about lead generation in terms of focusing on what people need as opposed to what they want. So if you can actually canvas opinion from within your existing resources, you will probably identify topics and themes for things that people are struggling with at the moment, things where they are having challenges. And obviously that would tend to be the way I would, in a business to business content marketing capacity, approach that challenging situation of I don't know what to write about, I've got writer's block. Now I saw a funny little blog post from someone the other day. If you did know what you're writing about but you're actually struggling to write, I did see a funny story where this guy said he bought an old iBook, a 15-year-old computer that couldn't connect to the internet, but it had a perfectly decent word processor on it. And whenever he needed to write something, he would use that because he would then have none of the distractions of his email and his Twitter and his WhatsApp and everything else that was continually distracting him on his main computer. So as far as approaching writer's block is concerned, when you need the content idea in the first place, talk to as many other people as possible, and when you've got the idea, then talk to no one and just get your head down and get it done.
Well, we've also had another one, which is something that I used to do back in the horrible days when I actually had to do some writing. But it's from Victoria, who's our marketing director at MarketScan. And I know it's something that she does a lot of as well, but it's keeping an inspirational folder. So when you see good content from competitors or anywhere else that you think you can repurpose for your own products and services, put it in a folder, and then you can use that, refer back to it, and that can start you going, get that process cracking, and it will just makes it a lot easier, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Obviously, if someone else has done the hard work and created something which inspires you, can you adapt, enhance, or indeed even promote that original content with and provide further added value on it to create entirely new pieces from that? Thank you, Victoria.
Fantastic. So now I'm getting a reader's block here. How do you increase open click-through rates with a cold list of contacts, which is another great question.
Yep. I mean, I think whether it's a cold list or whether it's a warm list, firstly, that principle of grabbing people's attention in the inbox is most important. You know, does the subject line resonate with the audience? Does it stand out for them? You know, as I say, if people aren't even opening the email, then anything else as far as the content is concerned is irrelevant because they haven't even got that far. So even with a cold list, then obviously you need to try and ensure that you are delivering something which grabs people's attention in that crowded space. As far as cold email is concerned, scale is important. If you're sending to cold lists, there's no point in sending to a few hundred. You need to be sending to thousands because there is very much it is very much a case of attrition with that. But in terms of generally improving those open and click-through rates, again, it's back to that principle of testing, trying different things, being creative. So when you come up with a really good subject line, don't just nail your colours to the mast with that one. Come up with 2 or 3 alternatives and try them, test them, and refine your tactics and see what works with your audience and what doesn't. And then over time, continuous improvement. If you're just sending the same stuff week in, week out, and there's no real imagination or creativity going into it, and it's just largely the same, then you keep on doing what you're doing, you keep on getting what you're getting. But very small changes, to things like subject lines can have a very profound effect on the performance of a campaign. It really can.
Yeah, and obviously in addition to that, it's about the challenges, overcoming the challenges that your prospects have got. So you continue to do that, as we've talked about already today, and certainly everyone that I speak to, I talk about it. You need to overcome those challenges. So you do that while you're being remarkable and relevant. You're going to be in a good place to turn the cold lists into good click-throughs into customers, clients, users, however you describe them within your organization. So next question. I create content and have been asked for lead gen support. What is the best way to make the creation of a weekly video work for us? How do we get it out there? My firm uses HubSpot currently.
Well, I'm not going to cover the HubSpot bit, but as far as video content is concerned, yeah, I mean, what you tend to see is video content gets better engagement than the written form nowadays. People are much more prepared to watch a YouTube video than they are to read a white paper, generally speaking. That's a sweeping generalization, and there will be industries and specific target audience where it's the reverse of that. But video content's great. If you could produce it to a high and consistent standard, then fantastic. Equally, I think in the age of lockdown, the kind of production values of really glossy video aren't necessarily as important, and that kind of just the handheld iPhone video is just as has just as much merit as long as the content's good, and that's really the key. Is that can you consistently deliver good video content, which again is talking to your target audience on their terms. In other words, addressing the topics that are of concern to them and delivering value to them. If you're doing good content marketing, then effectively what you're really doing is helping people to buy from you as opposed to selling to them. The business will be naturally attracted to you when you demonstrate your expertise, when you demonstrate your authority on subjects whereby they feel that your products and services will help them. Again, help them with those problems where they need a solution.
Yeah, and just remember the other channels that you can use for video as well to get it out there to the masses quite quickly, easily, and cost effectively. LinkedIn, I think, is always great that you can post your videos on there. You get the team to share it, and all of a sudden, it's reaching a massive audience. Again, Facebook's the same. It's quite easy to be able to put videos out on Facebook. Again, if you've got the right people sharing it within your organization, it's going to be going out to their peers, then there's a good chance that you're going to get some engagement. That's not discounting the fact that you can push the videos links to YouTube, as Dan mentioned, through email marketing. There's lots of ways that cost effectively you can get your videos across to your audience.
Yeah. One technical point on that, Al, that I forgot. Although it is perfectly possible to put videos themselves into emails, Generally, I would avoid doing that because support for it is still very sketchy across different email clients. So normally, if I want to include an email, include a video in an email, all I will do is I will take a screenshot from that video and put a play button on the image, and then that image will link to YouTube or wherever the video file is hosted.
Great. Right, so what is your best advice on how to avoid being seen as a generic email marketing campaign, just like the hundreds that appear in my inbox most weeks? How would you suggest we avoid the delete button?
Yeah, I don't think the delete button is your worry. It's more the junk and the spam button. Those are the ones you really need to be careful of. And again, it comes back to what we were talking before, the relevance of the email to who you're sending to. Okay, so in technical terms, what that means is using things like segmentation, so that you can say, right, here are all the people in industry A, and here are all the people in industry B. And my subject line and my email content is going to be relevant to them based on the way I can carve that audience up. If you're just sending the same email to everybody, then the chances are you will be vanilla. It's very, very difficult when you're talking to an audience of thousands to attract everybody with the same stuff at the same time. So where possible, if you can use segmentation, and in using segmentation, you use dynamic content. The most common or garden form of dynamic content in email marketing is the first name personalization. Hi, first name, blah, 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 blah. But there's so much more you can do with that, even in things like the subject line. So, you can actually use data and values that you hold about a company, name drop their company name, reference their industry, various things like that. Or indeed, demographic stuff for the individuals themselves. If you're targeting finance contacts, use finance related language in the subject line. If you're targeting technical contacts, use technical language in the subject line, and tailor the message as much as possible to who you're targeting. And again, that creativity, but also the technical ins and outs of ensuring what's in someone's inbox isn't just regarded as the same newsletter as everyone else is getting. One of my personal pet hates of that is when people just send their newsletter and the subject line is July newsletter. Oh, is it July? Oh, another newsletter. I must get onto this straight away. So you gotta stand out, and that again comes back to that relevancy principle. In technical terms, how you achieve relevancy in email marketing is to be as targeted as possible using things like segmentation and dynamic content.
Right, we've got a couple of questions in regards to clicks to sales or using email for without a sales or promotional tactic in each and every email. I think it's some of it we've sort of covered, but I've got a feeling you might have some other things to say to fill in some gaps on that type of question.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think is very important is please don't interpret a single click or indeed even an open of an email as buying behavior. I have had situations fairly recently where people have phoned up and said, "Oh, I called all the people that opened my email and they weren't interested," and well, of course not. So when we talk about buying behavior, you have to qualify people as thoroughly as possible. That's why if your email if you do send a newsletter and there are 2 or 3 stories in it, it might be only one of those actually leads to something which you would consider buying behavior. So again, it's looking at your content and categorizing it. If you've got best practice blog posts, if you've got webinars, if you've got soft content, that's great. But it's things like case studies and content which people would not read unless they were actually interested in your product or service that you then need to pinpoint. And obviously there's the tracking interactions with that in the email itself, but obviously the technology also exists to not just track the email interactions, but also to then track the subsequent website interactions. And that tends to be where you see the more interesting stuff. So you send a newsletter, people read a couple of blog posts, but then they tiptoe over to other content like the pricing page, like case studies. And when you can track that behavior, that is a reliable indication that you can then follow up with those contacts more assertively.
Excellent. This rolls straight into the next one of, do you feel personal style emails have replaced the overproduced MailChimp boo hiss, standard templates?
Yeah, well, again, we've mentioned HubSpot, we've mentioned MailChimp. Never mind all that inferior technology. If we break it down into the fundamental principle here, what we're talking about is HTML emails with graphics and a design that probably follow brand guidelines, and the sorts of emails that we would just send to each other in terms of the normal day-to-day use of email. And both have a place in the business-to-business marketing mix. We've had a few people talk about cold email, and certainly, business introductions written well, that effectively introduce your proposition, or indeed offer some form of value to the recipient. I would say there's a high value in using plain text email techniques in communication like that. But then on the other side of it, newsletters, etc., they have an equal place in that marketing mix. And again, it's going to depend on the specifics of who you're targeting and with what sort of messages to which is appropriate. But from a business to business perspective, don't worry about designing something overly complicated week in, week out. A plain text email is just as good. And if you remember back to that, that's what I talked about before with images. If you're relying on images lots to kind of get your message across, you then run into technical difficulties with things like Outlook blocking them, and indeed you even run into difficulties with things like the phones making images really small. So yeah, I'm a big fan of using plain text emails in the marketing mix, and certainly for introductory emails, to cold data, they probably are better.
Excellent. Right, so we are a social enterprise selling development programs for public, civil, health, local and third sector professionals. In emails intended to generate interest with people who could benefit, how much information should you include? How much text is too much?
Well, the simple answer to that one is less is more. And emails should be the introduction to the content. They shouldn't be the content themselves. We do have a customer who uses eShot, who I've talked to them about this many times. They have about 50 articles in their newsletter, and each article has about 40 words each. And it's just, I can't see how anyone would ever get through it. And I often get asked the question about, how do I make sure a particular link in my email gets more clicks than others? And so it's very simple: put it first. Can guarantee the top link will be the one that's clicked the most. So I think if you think about your own behavior in relation to email, you are probably scanning email as opposed to reading it. So what you are doing is you are in a very short space of time looking for meaning, looking for something relevant and specific to you. So that's about headlines. And indeed, you see with a lot of newsletters now, they've dispensed with the supporting copy completely. It would just be headlines, because what they want is they want to get people out of that flicking through their email, and they want to get them onto a web page, so that even if they do carry on browsing around, they do it on their website rather than moving on to the next email. So yes, I would, in business to business and business to consumer, less is more. Make sure your email content is punchy and to the point, and just in a few words, like with the subject line, the content of the email as well needs to attract people to click through to the website as quickly as possible.
And moreover, you've got to consider devices that people are using. If you're on the mobile and there's a lot of text, it's just not going to get read. It's going to be discarded.
Yeah. Scan.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then we've got a couple of questions in regards to LinkedIn. So how do we email in combination with selling through LinkedIn, and how to use LinkedIn successfully? And I know you've got some slides that you want to take us through, Dan.
Yeah, it's quite funny because obviously this is email marketing, but we had a few questions on LinkedIn, which I thought, fair enough. I'm not going to purport to be the expert on LinkedIn, but what I can do is share with you a couple of insights as to the sort of stuff that I've done, both for ourselves and indeed helped some of our customers to do with LinkedIn. And if I just share my screen now. So the first thing I would do with LinkedIn, as I think I mentioned earlier on, is you're looking at it from the perspective of your database. If you think about your database sat in your email marketing application in your CRM, it tends to be quite static. You're not necessarily going to find out about when people have changed roles, change jobs, move to different companies. But LinkedIn's great for that because, of course, people will update it to tell others when they've moved. And built into Outlook now, you will find actually if you enable it in your Outlook, you can actually get quite rich information from LinkedIn directly into your in your inbox when you are engaging with people. And then for those that do use eShot, we then can use things like the Outlook plugin for eShot to check, well, is that contact in my email marketing database? Is the data up to date and accurate? So you can, within the context of your Outlook, have I got up to date and accurate contacts for customers in both LinkedIn and in my email marketing database? So that's one of the ways in which I would say LinkedIn can be very useful is just housekeeping around your own data. Now, that might not be something that in a marketing capacity you can spend too much time on, but I would encourage your sales teams and indeed your account management teams to help you maintain good, accurate data. It's one of the bugbears of a lot of marketers I know is that they find that they've been emailing the wrong people for ages, whereby actually the sales team are sitting on the up-to-date and accurate data. It just hasn't been shared. The other way that we've used LinkedIn, and indeed I've seen a lot of others use it, is again back to that marketing mix principle of using it in tandem with other channels. And again, you can use LinkedIn to be highly targeted. So using tools like Zapier, we can pass data from eShot into what's called a LinkedIn matched audience. In other words, you say to LinkedIn, here's the email addresses, and LinkedIn, can you match those to members? And indeed, as a consequence, you can then target them with advertising on LinkedIn. And indeed, that can work the other way around. So if you do have things like LinkedIn forms, then obviously if you're advertising on LinkedIn and people download your white papers or engage with your content marketing on LinkedIn, that data can be passed straight into tools like eShot, and then you can have nurture series. Okay, so although there's the cost of the original click to consider, you're not then having to maintain the quite expensive practice of continuing to nurture those leads, via LinkedIn itself. You can hand that over to email, which is obviously going to be a lot more cost effective to then nurture those contacts in the longer term. So if they download your white paper via LinkedIn today, you can then put them into a nurture sequence, which sends them, 3 or 4 emails over the next week or so. So that's the two principal ways I use LinkedIn, but admittedly, I wouldn't say I'm the expert on that. My specialist subject is email, but like all things, social for me acts as a great way of enhancing marketing activity in other areas, and especially when it comes to data, it's really useful.
Excellent. Uncharacteristically, we are running out of time, and we've still got a few questions left. But for the eagle-eyed of you,
let's plow on.
Let's plow on. Yeah, for the eagle-eyed of you, you would have noticed on the final screen that Dan was sharing there, it was saying that Jamie was slipping away. And it's like we've rehearsed this, because the next question is, how can we use the engaged, slipping away, and disengaged sections to our full advantage?
Yeah, so what may be the case for some of you on the call is that doesn't make an awful lot of sense as to what we're talking about when we mention that. So what I'll do again is I'll just share my screen just so we can get a sense of what we're talking about there. And obviously you'll have to forgive me today, I can't share proper data when I'm talking about this. So this is just one of our training accounts. But what eShot does is you effectively have within it 3 categories: engaged, slipping away, and disengaged. And what that means, engaged people are opening your emails or clicking on your links or visiting your website within the last 30 days. And slipping away people are those who haven't done much recently, but they have done in the last 6 months. And then disengaged is those people where we've seen no activity in the last 6 months. So firstly, in terms of using what you do with disengaged, you have to do something different with it. Okay, One of the best things to do with it is to run re-engagement campaigns. And again, as we're running short on time today, I'll refer you to the follow-up email that will come out to you afterwards. There will be there's a couple of blog posts and bits on there in terms of re-engagement campaigns, where effectively you just have to change certain things in your email program to try and get a different response from those people that just don't seem to be engaging. But probably better than that is if you can catch them when they're slipping away rather than when they are disengaged. Because like I say, disengaged means you haven't heard from them in 6 months. And what you've got to then consider at that point is, should we still really be emailing them if we haven't had any engagement from them in months and months and months? Now, don't worry, every single email marketing database has disengaged contacts within it. Fact. And in fact, you probably find that the proportions of those disengaged contacts are quite high. But if you just accept that and never change anything, then what that means is you've got a huge swathe of your database which is not providing any value to you. It's just a liability. So what I would encourage you to do is look at those who are engaging with your emails. Fantastic. Email them more, carry on doing the good stuff. But when they start to slip away, or indeed they become disengaged, then you do need to look to do different things with them. And indeed, you may need to make tough decisions and actually say, we should stop communicating with those contacts. What you can then do, obviously, is speak to the professionals like Alex to go, right, we've got these companies whereby we haven't got any engaged contacts anymore. Who else should we be targeting within those businesses?
Excellent. Well, the next question was, how do I re-engage with disengaged contacts? So for the purpose of today, I think that the follow-up will cover that in addition to what you've already said.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, the 10-second answer to that one, Alice, simply send the email like it's from somebody different. So change who the email appears to be from, and indeed change the tactic in terms of the subject lines and things like that. Nothing else makes a difference at that stage because they're not engaging. So just appear different.
Okay, perfect. Right. So how is it best to build an automated campaign from scratch? And this is a question that I have always loved, because there's so many different ways that you can read it depending on who you are and what you're trying to achieve. But Dan, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, the general principle in terms of planning automation is, please think about marketing automation very differently from conventional email marketing. It needs planning and preparation. Okay, so if you can map out on a piece of paper, and personally, what I tend to do is use Post-it notes, and I will map out the journey that I want to take people through. So if you take a common example, like we talked a little bit about, an inquiry on your website, email 1, that goes immediately. And if they click on stuff in email 1, then send them email 2 tomorrow. And if they don't, then send it in 2 or 3 days. And if they engage with the next email, then again, send the next one straight after that. And if they don't, leave it a little bit longer. And what you find is you take people down different journeys whereby you're probably largely exposing them to the same content. You may just go at a different pace depending on what sort of engagement you are seeing from them. But in terms of planning that out, map it out on a piece of paper, like I say, some Post-it notes, email 1, what's it about, how long do we wait, then email 2. And indeed, with things like how long do we wait, is there a trigger, as in do we need to wait for something to happen, or do we just wait for an amount of time? Okay, but if you plan it out on paper first and then you build it using tools like eShot, you probably find your automation will stand the test of time. Because what tends to happen is when automations haven't been well thought through, is they get launched and then a week later people are amending them, and that's not good, because when you've got people at different stages of an automation, it's difficult. You have to pull the car over and stop it and service it before it can continue on its journey. So for marketing automation, put the preparation in. Again, we've got a couple of worksheets on that. So 2 of the most common forms of automation that we help customers set up. We'll set up a welcome series, in other words, sequences of emails that go to people when they take a positive action. And then there's also one on date-driven campaigns, so things like birthdays, etc., anniversaries. And we've got a couple of worksheets on that, and they will really help you to plan out an automation. And again, look out for the links in the follow-up email for those.
Great. And then the final question, which again, in fact, out of all of the questions that I've said, I love the question. This is always my favorite. Is email marketing dead? And what a way to finish.
Well, I certainly wouldn't be in business if it was. Email endures, and I do think there is an argument to say in a business-to-business capacity that email isn't the collaboration tool it once was. We do see many businesses moving to things like Microsoft Teams, Monday, Trello boards. What's the one I always forget?
Slack.
The Slack. Sorry, yeah. Thank you, Alex. So in terms of collaboration, certainly email in a business-to-business capacity has some competitors. But as far as communication is concerned, I still think in a business-to-business capacity, there is nothing more effective than email. There is just no other channel where you can reach people so reliably and, quite frankly, so cheaply. When we talk about things like social, not everybody's on LinkedIn. Not everybody's on there every day. And certainly, even for those who are, if you want to appear to them, quite frankly, you probably have to pay. In email, it's very rare that you find anybody in a professional capacity, apart from certain industries, who don't have email. And if you are targeting an industry where perhaps use of email is lower, then obviously, you need to get creative about that. That's where we have things like SMS tools as well. But generally speaking, email for me is still the most effective digital channel to reach an audience at scale with a relevant, accurate message quickly. It doesn't take an awful lot of effort to get a really good email campaign out the door, which is why you see government announcements yesterday, all sorts of stuff, and within hours I'm getting lots of emails from companies with their statements and their positions, and indeed even their offers about in relation to what the government have announced. Don't necessarily just take my word for it. Obviously I'm biased, but you only have to do a couple of searches into very detailed studies on the ROI of email marketing, and you'll find consistently across any number of surveys the ROI that you get from email marketing outstrips other digital channels by a considerable margin. Email marketing is far from dead as far as I'm concerned, but I'm happy to concede I am biased.
Well, I'm slightly less biased. 2 years ago, I was a lot more biased. However, I would say that, it's definitely not dead and nowhere near being dead. If you have got a bit more budget, I would very much use email as part of your overall strategy with other channels as well. But for me, for us at MarketScan, it is the biggest driver for us by country mile. But we do tag it into other channels.
Yeah, I think you've hit on an important point there, Alex. I wouldn't go, or should I do email or social, or should I do email or PPC or SEO? Actually, you need to do a bit of everything. And the modern digital marketer has a fantastic toolkit at their disposal, but equally it's quite a challenge. It's very difficult to be an expert in all those different areas. But that marketing mix, can the social stuff get you more email subscribers, and can those email subscribers in turn generate more tangible business opportunities? Again, that planning, can you actually use multiple channels to get people to a situation where they're investing in you, your products, your services, and your business? And I'd say the complexity of the modern business-to-business buyer journey, you probably actually need to think about multiple touch points, multiple channels over a considerable period of time. And certainly if you're targeting enterprise, if you're targeting big business, you have to think about that, A, in the long term, and B, multiple stakeholders. Are you targeting, not just a single individual within that business, but multiple individuals to influence them towards your products and services? Some you'll get via email, some you'll get via social, some you'll get by picking up the phone, and indeed any number of other mechanisms. Indeed, every now and then, you get a good old-fashioned letter from Royal Mail.
Direct mail is doing very well at the moment. Well, not in the last 3 months for obvious reasons, but for the 6 months previously, we were seeing it month on month. It was getting better and better results. So it's something else to consider.
Because I think so few people are doing it, and it would actually stand out. Only challenge at the moment, obviously, is no one's in the office to pick this stuff up in a lot of cases.
Yeah, hence the last 3 months. But Other than that, yeah, it's been good. Well, I think we've done well, Dan. For us, only being 10% over time is an achievement. So I firstly like to say thank you to everyone for sticking it out and staying with us. And I hope you all got the answers that you were looking for.